War is eternal. As inevitable as the grave. The old world, the rotting corpse within. Some fools think it worth saving. But there are beings who wish to bring about an eternal night. I am a bearer of lore to those with such power. Vampire counts of the von Carstein bloodline. My master, Manfred, has returned from the dead once more. He marches on the von Carstein ancestral pile of Castle Dragonhof. For I have brought him ill news that a master necromancer has claimed the fortress as his own. Manfred must retake his ancient stronghold, and either destroy the usurper within, or bind him to his will.
Hello everyone, my name is Malaiz. This is going to be the start of the vampire walkthrough for Total War Warhammer. We're going to be taking over the world as Vlad van Carstein, the first vampire.
Castle Drakenhof is returned to you, Vlad, first of the von Carstein line. Yet despite your ancient and revered power, there are those who would see you undone and your bloodline erased. The Templehof brood control the lands to the north as far as the River Ster. They defy your hegemony as the first and greatest of the vampire clans. Raise the undead hosts, take their lands, and burn their crypts for this insolence. The high mountains to the south are infested with dwarfs. Your homelands will never be safe with such an enemy so close. Make plans to drive their stunted kind out. Greatness runs throughout the von Carstein bloodline, my lord. Your greatness. You are the master of Sylvania, of all unliving, and soon the world.
So our first mission is been issued, and we must defeat an army belonging to the following faction of Templehof. And as a reward, we will get 1,000 dark magic, or our money.
Unstoppable!
So here's our hero on the overland map. You'll see that he's inside of a yellow circle. That circle denotes the area controlled by Castle Drakenhof, our main capital city. As we capture further cities and towns and other castles throughout the world, we will have a further area of influence, or this yellow circle. Anytime we're inside our own area, our units will regenerate health if they are injured. We have the capability of recruiting troops, raising dead, things like that. So being inside friendly territory gives you many benefits. One advantage that the undead have over other races is the ability to raise dead on their turn. And sometimes when you have large battles fought on areas, you'll even see unique enemies that can be brought back, or unique undead that you can raise after the battles have been occurred there. So we'll probably see some of those later on. We're going to get a unit of spearmen, a unit of skeletons, and 2 units of zombies. And since our first mission is to defeat an army pertaining to this faction, Tempelhof, we're going to go ahead and move our hero over and engage.
Shed their blood!
So over here on the left you'll see our hero's portrait, as well as a box denoting our army with all of its place cards. On the right hand side you'll see the enemy army. At the bottom here there's a small bar, and this bar shows a approximation of the army strength of each force. We are the gold bar and the enemy is the red, so we have a pretty big advantage, the computer's telling us. The region we're going to be fighting is Castle Drakenhof, and the terrain is going to be grassland. We have 3 separate options. We can either fight the battle ourselves, we can have the computer fight it for us, or we can retreat. So we're going to go ahead and go into battle here. So the enemy is undead, similar to us, so there's not going to be really any surprises with his units. He does have a unit of direwolves, which are very fast moving, which will give him some additional mobility and maneuverability in his army, but we have mobile and even flying units that can easily counter anything he could do with that. So the first thing I like to do at each start of each battle is to put my units into groups to make it more easy to select them once the battle has gotten chaotic and things are starting to go wrong. So if you select a unit, like such my hero right here, he'll be selected and I can move him around, give him orders, things like that. I can also hold down control and hit a number between 1 and 0, so in this case 1, control 1, and it'll put him in group 1, and anytime I hit the number 1, it'll select him, even if I have something else previously selected. Using that same method, I'm going to put all of my zombies into group 2. I'm going to put all of my skeletons, including the skeleton spearmen, into group 3. I'm going to put all my flying units into group 4, and I'm going to put my Blood Knight Cavalry in group 5. Now while they're placed in groups, I can more easily put them into a formation as well. So I'm going to select my hero and put him in the very front, since he's a frontline fighter. Next, I'm going to create a line of zombies, troops, to be a front line. And by holding down the right mouse button, I can drag it and it will spread the group that I have selected around to make a formation. The direction the arrows are facing denotes the direction the units will face, which matters for both shields, their offensive abilities, defensive abilities, everything. So, zombies are very weak, but they're also very inexpensive and very cheap to maintain. So you can have a large group of them and it's not very expensive. So it's always a good idea to have at least a couple of them to lead the charge and kind of soak up some of the enemy's damage. Directly behind them we're going to have our skeletons, which have shields, so they're somewhat resilient from the front to arrow fire. And they can be doing pretty good damage. In fact, they do better damage than the zombies do, but they're a little bit more expensive. We also have units of skeletal spearmen. These ones are really good against large units, so anything larger than man size, so cavalry, flying units, monsters, anything like that. We have our flying units. We're going to keep those ones off to one side. Because they are unaffected by terrain and they can simply fly over the enemy battle lines and attack enemy units, they're very effective at destroying enemy artillery, range attackers, things like that. And since the undead units don't really have any archers per se, we don't have any way of attacking in range ourselves, so flying and fast moving units are going to be really critical to our battle plans in the future. Lastly, we have our Blood Knights. The undead have many types of cavalry, but Blood Knights are actually the last kind that you get. They're one of the most powerful, and they're given to us as kind of a protection guard for the first in the vampire bloodline, Vlad, that is our hero. And so if we can keep that unit from getting completely destroyed throughout the course of this campaign, they're just going to get even more veteran status and basically become one of our most powerful units in our army. So they're going to be playing a big part. They're also extremely fast and have a big bonus to their charge. So they're really good at hitting the enemy on, say, the flank or behind, causing massive damage, and then disengaging and attacking again, or chasing down fleeing enemies. They're just simply devastating. So this meter up here is our Winds of Magic. It's a number between 0 and 30, and it denotes how much magic, if any, that we have available to use. And so right now we're at a 12 out of 30. It doesn't make that much difference in this battle, to be honest. We're going to be really focused on fighting, but later on we're going to get some pretty strong spellcasters and vampires, and this Winds of Magic gauge will make much more of a difference. So we're going to go ahead and just click Start Deployment. So now we're in our normal phase that we can move our units around, but since we already moved them before the battle started, we're going to be pretty much ready to go. Now this yellow box here shows the area in which we can deploy our troops. The white box here denotes the area that can be deployed troops if you have Vanguard deployment, and those units can be basically moved in more freely. And the red box denotes where the enemy can place his units. Now since we can already see where the enemy is, we can use one of the greatest advantages of Vlad van Karstein, the first of the Vampire Lords, and we can move our army completely in Vanguard deployment, not just a single unit, but the entire army. So we're going to have him get as close to the army as he can. We're going to have a huge line of zombies behind him. And we're going to actually spread these zombies out as far as we can, because if they were to get around the side of the enemy per se and start to envelop them, that would not be a bad thing at all. So coming from the other side, we're going to have our line of skeletons with the exact same mentality in mind. If they can kind of get behind the enemy and surround them, well, all the better for us. Over here on the very far left hand side, under this hill out of view range of the enemy, we're going to have our flying and cavalry units ready to get charged in when necessary. I'm probably going to actually have them move over into these trees once the battle starts, but we'll see. So we're ready to go now. Our first plane of attack, as soon as we click Start Battle, is we're going to have our hero attack the enemy hero. We're going to have the zombies charge as fast as they can, and the word charge is a relative term. They're very, very slow units. And then once they get a little bit of a head start, we're going to give our skeletons the command to attack. We're going to have our flying units engage the enemy direwolves and just simply take them out of the combat and remove their ability to move around. And then once the enemy is fully engaged with our zombies and skeletons and can no longer really move around, we're going to hit them with our Blood Knight cavalry from behind. Alright, so hero first, zombies next, flying units on the direwolf. I'm going to have my Blood Knights move up into the tree line up here, so they're ready when it's time for them to play their part. And now that the zombies and heroes are coming in, it's time for the skeletons to engage. So even though we are not really a magic using, almost all Vampire Lords have some type of magic needed to keep the undead alive. And so by using the Invocation of Nehek spell, I can help protect one unit that's taking heavy losses. In this case, I'm going to target my bats. So off there in the distance, you can see the blue circle as the spell goes off and begins healing them. Now that the enemy is fully engaged, and you can see that the direwolves are almost completely obliterated here, we are going to have our Blood Knights come in, and here they come. And they're going to hit the enemies from behind and just cause absolute havoc. Now I'm consolidating my skeletons and zombies, having them start moving off to the left-hand flank. Here comes that charge. As you can see, the big piles of smoke rising in the air, those are the enemy undead disintegrating. Here come our flyers. They're going to basically be our pretty powerful little smash from the other side. Undead units cannot lose morale. They cannot be feared. They don't know fear. So you cannot make undead units run away for their life. What you can do, however, is break their binding to the material world. You can basically cause their ability to stay in an undead state to start to crumble, which is basically their loss of morale. And so the clouds of smoke rising off of the enemy units are then being completely surrounded and routed. They can't run away in fear, they don't know what that is, but they are being so heavily devastated that they're basically just turning to dust. So they're sustaining losses by being slaughtered and killed, but they're also sustaining further losses every second by simply just not being able to maintain control of their being. And that applies for my units as well. It's all Vampire Lord. So maintaining fear is extremely critical for the Vampire Lord army, both offensively and defensively. You'll see that I'll get many units later on that have the ability to cause fear within the enemy, which is a great advantage to have. But you'll also notice that once my units begin to experience fear in some form of themselves, they won't run away, but they will begin to disintegrate if placed in disadvantaged positions. So now we're just going to focus on destroying the enemy's leader, and then this battle will be over. So the battle was pretty unfair. We had almost twice as many units as he did. And honestly, most of the 131 losses that we suffered were from our zombie units, if you see the stats on the left-hand side in the box. So we lost some zombies, but the enemy lost almost everything he had. In fact, he did lose everything he had. He had no unit. And that's how many of the battles will go with vampire counts. It's kind of all or nothing. Once the units start to lose and crumple away, they tend to all go. You don't generally have anything left at the end. So at the end of the battle, we're going to get experience, we're going to get loot, and we're also going to get some options. One of the options is return the captives to the enemy, which will give us a sum of money that we can use, but it's also going to give us a negative to the rate at which our units return, our casualty replenishment rate, you might call it. And it's basically because we're returning captives that we could use to fill our own army. We can't basically refill it as fast. We suffer a penalty. We can murder all the captives, which will give us a leadership bonus for 5 turns. And leadership is not the best for all of the races. It's not their necessary stat, but for vampires, and since their units will simply crumble away with poor leadership, that's actually a really good one to have for 5 entire turns. And the last option is to dominate the captives. Instead of returning them or murdering them, we can simply control as many as we can, which will give us the greatest replenishment of our forces. But since most of the things that we lost were simply zombies, which were designed to be lost, we're going to go ahead and take the murder captives for additional leadership for 5 turns, especially this early in the game.
I shall go.
So with the completion of that mission, we've gotten 1,000 dark magic. Our next mission is to capture and occupy Eschen. So Eschen is over here in the top right east of us, northeast. And an interesting thing about Eschen is it's part of the province of Eastern Sylvania. So Castle Drakenhof, the castle we start the game with, is the capital city within this province. Eschen is over here, and north of that is Waldenhof. Now if we can manage to capture all 3 of the areas within, or all 3 of the cities within Eastern Sylvania, we will get the ability to issue a commandment which offers a bonus to anyone within that entire area of influence. So again, we have this yellow circle here denoting the area that this Castle Drakenhof controls. If we take Eschen under our control, then that box will expand and it will continue to control all of this area. And once we take Waldenhof, it will expand once again to make a giant box that will control the entire east of Sylvania here. Now, one great thing about this is, once we have that, we have a commandment that will give us a bonus that we can use to any army that we control within this entire box. So we're going to definitely be working towards that in the next few turns.
I am invincible.
So over here on the very far left, there's a yellow meter, a gauge that you can see right next to the profile picture. And that's our movement gauge. That shows us how far we can move in our turn. So at the bottom of the screen, you'll also see that we have some green plus signs, I guess, crosses. They denote that units are going to be regenerating if they are through the next turn. The number of crosses you see denotes how many of them are going to be healing. So 1 cross means a little bit, 2 crosses means a good amount, and 3 crosses means, wow, you're going to get a huge replenishment of your lost forces in that turn. This only generally occurs if you're within friendly territory, so within the yellow box. If I cross over into the red enemy territory, then all of these units will cease to be healing unless I go into an encampment stance, but we'll get into that later. So for now, I'm going to go ahead and begin to move as far as I can in the direction of Eschen, and I don't really care if I get into the red, because if I don't have any replenishment of my zombies, that doesn't really matter to me at all. I can always use the replenishment spell that I have if I need to, or I can simply raise the dead on my next turn. So speaking of stances, we're in a normal stance now, which gives us just normal movement and every other thing, no special conditions. But another stance we can try is marching stance. Now marching stance will give us a 50% bonus to our movement range on this turn. So if you see on the left hand side that yellow movement bar that shows us how far we can travel, if I go to marching stance, you'll see that it turns green and it refills slightly. And so if I go into this stance, that will be the amount of movement range that I can move this turn instead. However, if I do that, then I get 3 negative effects. 1, this army can no longer recruit any units itself this turn. Its vigor, if it gets attacked within battle, is tired, and it no longer has combat initiative. So I do not have the ability to start a battle with someone else. And if I'm attacked by someone else, then every unit within my army will start the battle tired. So it's not necessarily the greatest thing to do, but since the enemy doesn't have any forces that can really challenge us in a direct engagement, and I know that I'm going to need to end my turn soon, and I know that I want to get to that town of Eschen, I'm going to go ahead and switch to marching stance, and I'm going to move all the way over to right outside that town.
I knew the way.
Now on my next turn, I'm going to be able to get to the Eschen. At least that's the hope. So, since we did very well in that last battle, we have the ability to increase our power of our Lord through a skill point. Now we have many different options here, but I like to follow a single path, at least a single goal, I should say. So since I want this hero to be primarily a tough, powerful hero that I can use to destroy the enemy up close and even target maybe the enemy hero, kind of be an assassination type unit within the battle that's still relatively strong, that can provide a leadership bonus, I'm going to go ahead and go to the ability Hunger. Now, as long as leadership is not broken on this unit, now it's my hero and my leader of my faction, so if his leadership breaks, it basically means that everyone in his army is going to die anyway, so not a big deal on that one. So as long as that doesn't happen, it has a constant duration, so it never wears off, and it replenishes the hit points of myself in melee combat greatly, forever. So it basically just means that as a vampire, he and the being the first of the lords and everything, if I get this ability, he's just going to constantly heal. So I think I'm going to keep that. It's going to go really well with the whole strategy we're going with.
And tremble.
So again, since we're now in enemy territory, you can see here on my army pane at the bottom, the crosses that were used to be green have gone away and are now replaced with a green cross with a red line through it. This means that since we're in foreign territory, we're not replenishing our units anymore. So before we end our turn, there's one more thing we can do. And there are 4 books of research that we can do as a vampire lord. There's the Liber Necronomica, that deals with skeletons and zombies and beings of dread power. There's okay, I take that back. There's the Book of Archon. The Book of Archon is about zombies and skeletons. The Liber Necronomica is about beasts and demons and things like that. Raise dead costs, leadership, cairn wraiths, crypt ghouls. The De Nore's blasphemous bestiary has to deal with fellbats, dire wolves, bloodhounds, vargulfs, terrorgeists, so the monsters in the bestiary. And then the Book of Blood has to deal with vampiric corruption, diplomacy with other races, heroes. So, since I'm kind of gonna be, I would like now. There's a difference here that kind of goes strategically. The strategy of skill points that we spend on our main hero lord applies to the army and his purpose within the entire faction. This research here takes long periods of time and will affect our entire faction overall and will shape our strategy in every battle, not just in a single army. And so this is a pretty critical decision that we're going to make. Now, I do like our skeleton and zombie units, but I feel like improving a unit that's kind of designed to be thrown away, and by that I mean the zombies, is a waste. However, the bonuses for Black Knights and Grave Guards and things like that are really nice, because those units are actually quite powerful, the skeletons, later on. So that's one option. The attrition suffering when in hostile territory and things like that is really nice. From the Necronomica, the campaign movement range, the bonuses to the Cairn Wraiths and Hex Wraiths, which are a very specialized undead unit. All of these are really nice, but I feel like they are, again, very specialized in a single unit itself, and I'm not sure that I want to necessarily go into that way. If I go with the beasts, then I can improve the strength and power of my fastest moving units. So my flying units, my monsters, things like that. So that's actually I kind of enjoy that. They've got some pretty nice options for the undead. I just don't enjoy, it's risky to focus too many points into a single monster because it can be focus fired, especially later on with artillery. So I'm really trying to go back and forth here between the skeletons and the beasts. If I go with the skeletons, then my main core army will be tough, resilient, and strong, and I can augment that with spells. If I go with the bestiary, then my army will not be as tough and resilient, but its hitting power and the monsters that it has will be simply devastating. And so I think that when I consider everything, I want to go with that way. At least initially. I want to make my monsters and beasts just terrifying. I want to go, for example, the Vargeists. The fact that they can fly, I really like that. And if I make them really fast and strong, I'm going to go with that. Plus, it's going to, along the way, improve the weapon strength of my direwolves and the speed of them, making them even faster. And it's going to make direwolves even cheaper to keep and recruit. Now, not necessarily, instead of going for that, I'm going to actually change it up. And I'm going to go for Beastmaster after Leader of the Pack and Blood Hunt for the +2 units for all recruited from the Forest Chain. It's going to take 37 turns to get there, but I'll be really happy when I get it, and along the way I'll get improvements for my dire wolves. So I'm going to have to keep that in mind and have a good, nice size army of those. Alright, so enough talk. Let's go ahead and finish this turn and start turn 2. Kind of interested to see what the enemy is going to be doing. So the winds of magic, they come from the realm of chaos and they blow across the world. So every time you enter into a battle, the battleground that you're currently fighting in not only has terrain bonuses and other things like that, such as the direction you're fighting from, weather, things like that, but the type of magic, how much magic, if there's even magic allowed in that battle, will all be determined by the winds of magic. And so they often change every turn or every other turn. So you're going to see this message here a lot. Okay, so now we're at the beginning of our next turn. We're going to go ahead and switch back into our normal stance. And so we're going to lose that extra movement speed, but we're going to get the ability to actually initiate combat and do some things. Now, before I forget, I did not build any buildings at our main castle, Castle Drakenhof. Now, it's not the end of the world, because it just means that we didn't spend money and our income is continuing to build. But it's not...
I thirst.
We did lose a turn in building towards the future, so we'll just have to see what we're doing. Now, we do have an option here, because
I am unstoppable.
the enemy is inside the zone of control. If you can see the red arrows, when I place my cursor on the enemy army, he's actually inside the zone of control from both Waldenhorf and Eschen that he controls. So if either of those are attacked, he's going to be able to reinforce it, and I'm going to have to attack both of it, both the defenders of the town of Eschen and a reinforcement from him. However, his force is nearly negligent. The bar that you see, and I say negligible, I should say. His force has very little chance of being able to do anything in the combat, especially if they're deployed in the direction that they are, where they're going to come from the north and I'm attacking from the south. I can just simply fly past his army of Eschen and just have my forces land in the middle of his relatively small army and just decimate it. So I'm not really worried about him too much. The bar that you see next to his flag, the red one, it's not a bar denoting how powerful his army is. It's a bar denoting how full his army is. So a bar that's completely full simply means that the character is using 20 out of 20 character slots in that army. It does not mean that he has a more powerful army than you if your army is only half full. Plus, tactics always will come into play. So, we're going to see if we can raise any dead, which we can. We're going to go ahead and raise another unit of skeletons and 2 units of zombies, which is going to bring us to 15 out of 20, and we're going to have a huge force of 600 zombies. So here we go. Now our army's on the left, his army's on the right, and if you see, there's actually 2 forces here, so he's going to be reinforcing, but only one of them is a hero. This one here is a level 1 hero, Dieter the Stickler, whereas Lutz von Sickler is basically just been a promoted unit of sword cavalry, sword infantry. It's a normal unit in every way, it just has a banner that denotes it as the leader of that army. So we're going to go ahead and attack. Alright, so again, we don't really need to worry about the magic too much in this battle. It's going to be over pretty quickly, so we're just going to click Start Deployment. Again, because he's the Vampire Lord, he has the ability to deploy anywhere. The thing that's going to be really nice about this is, because this is a really wide open map, the area that the enemy is going to be deploying in, denoted by the red circle, and the area that we can deploy in, denoted by the white circle, overlap and do not hit the edge of the map. So we can deploy our army behind his deployment zone. Our entire army behind his deployment zone. Right next to where his reinforcements will be coming off. So it doesn't even matter where they come out, because they're basically going to walk straight into a gigantic mass of forces that are just going to be sitting there waiting to slaughter him, where the rest of our forces are going to be attacking him from behind. So let's make groups first. One thing I do think that I had not initially considered when picking this hero is, since his entire army has Vanguard deployment, he's probably going to be sort of a paradox of the Vampire Lord army. Most Vampire Lord armies will feature a gigantic group of, or horde of zombies or skeletons that simply charge forward, engage the enemy, and take devastating losses, but reduce the enemy's effectiveness of fighting because they use up their ammunition and cause them to waste their spells on cheap throwaway units, while the more powerful fragile units then come in and start to cause havoc. But with him being with that Vanguard deployment, if you were to fill your entire army with extremely powerful units and not worry about the whole fodder thing, well, you could just Vanguard deploy 20 dragons behind the enemy force, and as soon as the battle starts, just land in their artillery and ranged units and just destroy them all immediately. Now, I'm not saying you won't be able to get killed by any means, but it's kind of an interesting thing to think about. I never really considered that. So, with enough talk out of the way, I'm going to put my forces down. I'm going to put all of my skeletons... You know what's interesting is after all that talk, I didn't even try to do it. Okay, well, I take it back. The white area denoting where the enemy can hide, and the area in which we can Vanguard deploy do not overlap. I thought they did, but they don't. Everything else I said is completely correct about the strategy. And there will be maps where will be able to deploy behind the enemy. So, just not going to be in this one. I'm going to put my hero right here in the front. I'm going to make a gigantic wall of zombies. And I'm going to be kind of trying to make sure I don't put them in the water, I should say. As you can see here, the cursor changes when I put the cursor over a pond or a puddle, and it changes to shallow water. So shallow water and marshland are difficult for small units to traverse and fight in. So if you're on a horse, you can just charge right over the shallow water. If you're, however, walking in armor or you're a zombie, it's going to really slow you down. So I don't want to make them have to go through that. I will then place my units of skeletons off their side to allow them to kind of swing around and hit them. Since I have a big group of flying units, I'm going to put them group 4, put them off the opposite side, and put my Blood Knights there as well since they're not really affected by water. So let's get this started.
Blood von Karstein.
So my hero is charging forward with the zombie horde.
Lord of the dead.
Now I have my skeletons coming in as well. Alright, now I've got my beasts charging in. Interestingly enough, it looks like they attacked my hero with bats. Now I'm not saying that bats aren't effective, but they're the weakest of the beasts. So
No one can stop me.
I'm going to use my healing spell. Just drop that straight on myself. Use the Master of Beguilement. This spell will actually reduce the combat effectiveness of the targeted enemy savagely, severely. Like it pretty much reduces their effectiveness by 46. And that enemy has a combat weapon skill of maybe 50 or 60. So it's like 90% reduction, 85%. And now that our units have landed and are engaging, they're being attacked from the side. Now, I'm not really that worried about it because what they don't see is my Blood Knights coming. And these Blood Knights are not going to be just hitting the front of these skeletons, like where their shield is. They're about to plow straight into the backs of the undefended skeletal forces and zombies. And it's going to turn around real quick. Watch their health bar. So the enemy army literally just instantly collapsed and lost 10 or 15% of its total effectiveness and health. It's now down, their commander army is at 50% and breaking. The rest of my forces have already annihilated everything that they were fighting, and it's now basically just cleanup. And if you notice, because of the healing spell, the hero is uninjured, ending the fight without a scratch. So he definitely was taking some hits earlier. When he got hit by the bats, for example, their charge did some pretty severe damage to him. By severe, I mean about 5% of his total health. But it was enough to see it go down. So we're going to have to keep an eye on that in the future and increase his resilience, especially if we want him to be a frontline fighter. And with that, we can watch the battle end. Oh, we're waiting for the enemy reinforcements to show up. They don't seem very happy to be here. I'm just going to have my flyers hit them as hard as they can right before the Blood Knights come in. So I'm not sure how much of this is going to be... Shouldn't last too long, I should say. So the enemy hero uses his healing spell, so I use my healing spell, and I use my curse that reduces his effectiveness, and he's dead. So he had about 630 troops, and I had 1,200. So I had twice what he had, and I lost 77. But again, if you look at the combat losses, you can't tell as easily, but it was bats, skeletons, and zombies. One of his units of skeletons got 71 kills. That's pretty impressive. Alright, so we got some more money. We're definitely going to occupy this settlement. So I do want to go over the other options with you though. So if you capture a settlement that is of the same type as yours, so if as a vampire I can capture other vampire settlements, or I can capture empire human settlements. So I'm going to occupy this one. I can also loot it, which will destroy some of the buildings but give me money, but allow me to control it. I can sack it, which retains control with its original owner, but I get a huge amount of money, or I can burn it to the ground and let nobody use it. So we killed an enemy hero in battle, we completed a mission, and we're getting another mission now. We need to loot, occupy, sack, or raise 2 different settlements, and we'll get a bonus of $2,000. So, before we finish this turn, oh, we got another quest. So we'll get a gold sigiled sword and a necromancer hero if we complete the Battle of Helfen, which is directly above us. So we may be doing that in the next couple turns, we'll have to see. So we'll accept that. And before we finish this turn and build some more buildings, I think it's a good place for us to stop. And so I'm going to go ahead and end there and say thanks for watching the first episode, and I hope to catch you in the next one. Thanks. Bye.